Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to be here. So I'll just speak briefly today about why I think the future is bright for tech entrepreneurs in South Africa, and why the future for South Africa is pretty bright in general, which is probably not a popular view nowadays. Before I get onto all the free Wi-Fi stuff that we're doing with the City of Tshwane, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on my story. Then I'm going to tell you all about the Tshwane free Wi-Fi story, and then perhaps give some tips around other people want to replicate working with the government. So I'm from Pretoria. Is anybody here from Pretoria? I'm not going to judge you guys. Does anybody go to the Glen High by any chance? The Glen was my school. It was a feeder school for Pollsmoor. I managed to escape and I went to University of Port Elizabeth, and I became a chartered accountant after that. I worked for Deloitte. In 2002, I qualified. They didn't offer me a job to stay, so I was looking around for a job, and then I managed to get into the game of the cell phone industry. Funny that. And I did cell phone tracking. So we started a business to let you track your wife, or your husband, or your kids. And it turned out a whole lot of husbands wanted to track their wives, and that business did really well, which was a blessing and a curse. The blessing was I made a lot of money. The curse was I thought the startup stuff was very easy, and subsequently I've tried to lose as much of that money as I possibly can. Then I went to iBurst, and I ran a wireless broadband network for a while. And wireless broadband is probably the most exciting non-profit industry in the world. So I spent about 3.5 years doing that, and then I moved to Stellenbosch. And it was right about when I had my first daughter that I started feeling a little bit less comfortable just doing everything in a very selfish manner for my wife and I, just to live a good life, and rather thinking about how I could make a difference whilst also making money, but maybe make a difference for the future of the country. So the way I saw it was the only place I could really play was in this kind of tech space, and anybody with half a brain could see that smartphones were coming, and mobile phones in general were completely transforming the world, particularly developing countries. So I decided to start a business called World of Avatar, smart apps for dumb phones. And we would make apps, basically copy stuff coming out of the States that would help people make money and build community, and we would translate it to work on feature phones, which back then and still today comprise the majority of phones in the country and in Africa. So that was quite an exciting movie. We had about 17 companies. I'm sure some of the people in this room were people we invested in. And we grew quite quick. And then I learned a very quick lesson there. I realized that a lot of the stuff is luck. So you can you can have lots of money, you can have lots of talent, you can have a great strategy, you can have a great product, but you have to get lucky as well. And I realized I can either spend hundreds of millions trying to get lucky, or I can buy somebody who already got lucky. So I went to visit Mixit. This was in 2011. And long story short, we did this deal to buy Mixit. Has anybody ever used Mixit? Are there any pedophiles? Okay. Well, I mean, the first thing, it's not actually a platform for pedophiles, which is why we bought it. But it's a hugely successful business in its own right. And it had 10 million monthly active users when we got it. So, whilst everybody could see these waves of WhatsApp and smartphones coming, we just had this opportunity to get hold of somebody that had already got really lucky and maybe do something with that. Now, a lot of people, especially smart people, so I guess a lot of you people, would have said, geez, what an idiot. Why on earth would he buy something like Mixit? Now, I'm an accountant, so I understand numbers and I understand profit and cash flow. And the whole premise of buying Mixit was we were going to turn it into a distribution channel for mobile operators. That is the business model. So Vodacom, MTN, Cell C will give you 7% ongoing on any starter pack that you sell for them. So we had 10 million monthly active users. The average revenue per user was 150 Rand a month. And we cut a deal with Cell C where we would get 7% times 150 times 10 million or 1 million or however many customers we could get to port or move in some trackable way. So suddenly this became a hell of a big profit business as opposed to just a vanity business. They say in startup world there's 3 metrics. Users, so let me just get this right. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is reality. And the only thing I wasn't really interested in was cash flow. So we had this business model where we were going to get the telcos to use this as a distribution channel and give us a cut of any customers we sent them. And the logic was that we had such a loyal base, we could send a message to the guy saying, hey, move from Vodacom to Cell C, or move from MTN to Vodacom, or whatever it was. So we did the deal, we bought it, we're finishing this deal with Cell C, and then my dad took over Cell C, which was kind of irritating, because he stopped the whole process with Cell C, because he said, no, we've got to be careful about the corporate governance on this whole thing. So I said, fuck Dad, come on, man. And that didn't help me. And then I went to Vodacom, and it turns out Vodacom weren't all that happy that somebody called Knott-Craig was running a competitor. So they didn't want to do a deal with me. And quite quickly, my whole business model for Mixit unraveled. And then I started losing the confidence of my partners. And exactly a year to the day after we bought Mixit, me and my partners reached a mutual agreement. They told me to fuck off, and I said, okay. Anyway, that was quite embarrassing. I live in a small town called Stellenbosch. They say in Stellenbosch, if you get divorced, you're still brother and sister. So when I was walking around town, it was a little bit embarrassing. People were pointing at me. So I got on a plane with my family, went to the States. I came back after a couple of months, and I realized I was convinced I'm living in the right country. I'm convinced we were trying to tackle the right problem, and there was a lot of money to be made. We just had to do it in a slightly different way. And one of the things I'd learned out of all of those internet startups was that the problem is we don't have a big enough local audience to support local web startups. And that's a function of affordability, internet affordability, not a function of access. So everyone says we've got lots of access. Well, no, we've got lots of access. You can get 3G, 4G anywhere in the country. The problem is it costs too much money. So if you spend 1 rand a meg on data, which is what you would spend on, say, Vodacom, out of bundle, which is what most of the people in the country purchase data with, out of bundle, to watch a 7-second HD YouTube video will cost you 150 rand. So that's kind of, now maybe not everybody's going to be watching 7 seconds of HD YouTube, but the problem is nobody knows how much data is actually being consumed when they're on the internet. And if they're paying 1 rand a meg, they'd rather just stay the hell off the internet than have the silent airtime just disappearing in the background. So you've got to actually make it free. This is what finally dawned on me. You have to figure out how to make the internet free. And it's not just for us to have eyeballs and users to sell things to. When I say us, web entrepreneurs, it's also for our country, right? You can't really have a thriving democracy country unless everybody's got the same access to information. People can email their CVs. People can download textbooks if they don't get delivered. People can find an online course, do an extra science tutorial without their teacher having to necessarily do it for them. And the truth is, most people in South Africa don't have access to that because they can't afford it. So if you do the math, it all comes down to something. We have to start treating the internet like we treat water and electricity. It's a basic utility. And water and electricity in this country is a right that everybody is given, and everyone gets a daily quota for free, and that gets subsidized by taxpayers. When you go through your quota, you start paying. So I thought, okay, maybe we can do that for internet. And we just accept that this thing's free. I mean, that whole idea of rich people paying for free things so that most people paying for things and giving it to other things doesn't resonate with everyone, but for me at least, I want to live in the country forever, and I can't look around this country and think to myself, everything's perfect. All I do is I look around and see inequality. And I think to myself, if the inequality carries on, there won't be a country to live in one day. So one way to reduce the inequality is to make the internet free, and let some of my taxes go towards subsidizing that, and let everybody get access to education, job opportunities, online healthcare, etc., and also information about who's running the country. So I started a non-profit. It was called Project Isizwe, and we would go and work with municipalities. So I knocked on the door of Stellenbosch municipality, but the lights are on, no one's at home. I went to Cape Town. They're doing a great job. If you don't believe me, just go and ask them, because they're going to tell you. So after a few weeks of speaking to Cape Town, I realized I had to revert to my strategy for when I was trying to find love. Now, for those of you who find it easy to find love, you won't relate to this, but for people like me who find it very difficult attracting members of the opposite sex, we had to develop strategies. So my strategy was go ugly early. So I looked around the country and I thought, what's the ugliest city, And I looked at Gauteng and there were some problems up there. So anyway, through some friends of Branko Brikic from the Daily Maverick, put me in touch with Ranjeni Munsami from the Daily Maverick. She put me in touch with a guy called Knott-Craig for the Gauteng ANC. And he put me in touch with Executive Mayor Koscienso Ramokgopa, who is the mayor of Pretoria, Tshwane. And I said, look, we got this idea. How'd you like to give it a go? And he said, I'm in. And we said, well, it's going to cost money. He said, don't worry about the money. Make sure it works. But you're going to have to make it work without us paying you. And if it works, you're going to have to trust that we'll pay you. I'm like, well, based upon what I've read in the newspapers, that's not a winning business model. but we managed to, we took a risk. Well, it's easy to take risks when you don't have options. And no one was offering me any jobs, and billionaires weren't throwing money at me. So I had to basically take the chance. So that was in August 2013. In November 2013, we rolled out this network. The first phase, 5 sites, capacity for about 25,000 people, and it worked really well. I got such nice feedback. We did another phase. We also had to do it completely at risk of about 200 sites. Cost us about 20 million rand to roll it out. And then from then, it just became very easy because there was so much political support that they didn't find any problems getting the budget. And contrary to popular belief, municipalities actually do pay. The trick is you've got to make sure you've given them all the documents they need before they're allowed to pay you. So today, the city of Tshwane has got 776 free Wi-Fi access points. Now, this is not like always on Wi-Fi, which is always off. This is like the Wi-Fi we're using here, which is, it just says Tshwane free Wi-Fi, you click it, you go straight onto the internet. There's no username, there's no password, there's no advertising, there's no clever thing that basically makes you rather just spend money on your 3G than try to get through this convoluted labyrinth. And the average speeds are 15 megs per second. So the average speed for Tshwane free Wi-Fi is 15. It sometimes bursts up to 25, 30. And you get a daily cap of 500 megs per device. So, that's quite a lot. And with that, to date, 1.4 million devices have connected. It's become the biggest municipal, government-funded free Wi-Fi network on the continent, not just in South Africa. And 23.7% of buildings in Tshwane are now within walking distance of free Wi-Fi. And the idea is that by 2017, all buildings in Tshwane will be within walking distance of free Wi-Fi. That's universal access to the internet. And that's the government treating internet access the way they treat transport. So they say, if you can't afford a car, we're not going to put a bus stop in front of your house, but you can walk from your house to the nearest bus stop. If you can't afford broadband, we're not going to give you free 3G or free ADSL or fiber, but you can walk from your house to the nearest free Wi-Fi zone. Okay, so maybe just some things how I apply this experience I've had with working with the government to being a tech entrepreneur, is that, tech entrepreneurs in South Africa and in Africa face a couple of big problems. The first problem is it's hard for them to find problems that are not being solved by Silicon Valley. So if you can't solve something that's just not going to be competing with somebody from Silicon Valley, you're just wasting your time. The second thing is, if you come up with this idea that's unique, you can't find money. So you can't find investors. And then when you do find investors and you've got a great idea, you can't make money in your business. So those 3 problems, big problems. The way we're actually finding ourselves in a position to tackle those problems as startups is countries like South Africa and all countries in Africa, the problems that are the biggest problems are being tackled by the government. So healthcare, education, crime, housing, all of these problems are massive societal problems, and they're actually the mandate of the government to solve. These are not problems that people in Silicon Valley can conceptualize. These are not problems that are common in Sweden and in California. And the government's got budget. So what that does, it solves, if you start dealing with GovTech, in other words, using technology to solve government's problems, firstly, you're going to find yourself doing things that nobody else in the world's doing, or especially people in Silicon Valley. Second thing is you're going to find the government will give you money to do it, so you don't have to raise capital. And thirdly, there's a business model in that, because if it works for one administration, you can scale it to other administrations. And a little example of something like that we did now is something called Namola. So I travel a lot. I leave my kids and my wife at home a lot. We all worry about crime in South Africa. And I just thought, how can we help the government deal with crime? So we went to the mayor of Tshwane and said, can we help you guys deal with crime? He said, of course you can. I said, okay, we'll make an app that if you see somebody being necklaced or hijacked or something's happening, instead of phoning 10111, waiting, getting through, waiting, explaining where you are, waiting for them to communicate your coordinates to the nearest cop, waiting for feedback, and then sitting there and waiting, you can just open an app, you can click request assistance, and the 3 nearest cop cars will get a notification on a tablet in their car. Your GPS will be shared with him. You'll get an ETA based on Google Maps, and he's got a blue light, so you shouldn't be late, and he just rocks up. So he said, that's a good idea. And so we did that. We took a bit of risk, but now they pay us a hell of a lot of money. We've installed that app in 653 cars, trained 2,000 officers, and I think by the end of this month is live. So that means a police force in South Africa, the Tshwane Metro Police, will be available on an app. It's like incredible that, you know? And this is not a problem that I see people in Silicon Valley tackling. You know, they're not thinking about how do we make sure somebody comes and saves me from being shot. You know, they're thinking about how do I take a photo. And if you can do it for crime, I'm pretty sure you can do it for housing, which is a massive problem for the government, and all agri-tech problems and all of that. But how do you do that? I mean, it's easy for me to say, oh, I just go to the mayor and do that. The only way you can ever do a deal with anybody is to build a relationship of trust. Now, how trust generally works is it's about making promises and keeping promises. And how we established this relationship of trust with Tshwane at the beginning through a chain of people that trusted me and that the mayor trusted. And then what happened is I made a little promise to him. I said, we'll do this Wi-Fi, and we did it. And then he made a promise to me saying, I'll pay you. And he did it. And then we'll say we'll do another bigger step, and we did it. And we kept over-delivering on all these promises. I must say, if there's one thing I learned from our Mix-It debacle, it was never over-promise, under-promise. That's how you build trust, because you keep over-delivering. And, you know, dealing with the government, I don't see any difference between dealing with the government and dealing with corporates, like Vodacom or SAB or Apps or anything like that. Some people in corporates are useless. Some people are good. Some people are corrupt. Some people aren't. The difference I find between dealing with the government and dealing with people in the private sector is most people who are working in the government are doing it because they want to make a difference. And you don't often find that in the private sector. So if you're trying to build a business that makes money but it makes a difference at the same time, government's your natural customer. So I'll conclude with, you know, why I'm so optimistic about the future for our country, for our continent, and for tech entrepreneurs from here in general. You know, I'm sure there was a time where people said free water was a pipe dream, excuse the pun. You know, especially in countries like South Africa, where most of our population is rural, there are massive distances to cover, and 40% of the population lives in what is called moderate poverty. And yet, 86.9%, I think, of households in South Africa today have access to piped water. Now, water is hard. Okay? Water, you require a dam, you require pipes to connect the dam to everybody's houses, and you need to pray for rain. Wi-Fi is not that hard. Wi-Fi, you just need a tower or a mountain. You don't have to have any wires or pipes because it's wireless, and you don't have to pray for rain, so there's no need for God's intervention. If you can do it for water, you can do it for Wi-Fi. The city of Tshwane is already doing it, and by 2017, everyone will be within walking distance. If the city of Tshwane can do it, then the rest of South Africa can do it. And if the rest of South Africa can do it, then the whole of Africa can do it. And that's why I'm confident that in my lifetime, we will have unicorns coming out of Africa that are tech unicorns. But more importantly, every one of us will be within walking distance of free Wi-Fi. Thank you very much.